Hey guys, welcome back to 30th Century Reverie Media. Today I'm presenting to you my February reading wrap up. I read 10 books in February, so let's get straight into it. The first book that I read is Emma by Jane Austen. I'm continuing with my Austen bibliography binge this year. I am now 4 books in, and yeah, I only have Mansfield Park, Sense and Sensibility to go, and then the odds and ends, Sandition, Other Tales stuff. I liked this quite a lot, but upon reading it at first, I had kind of mixed opinions. It's really, really dialogue heavy in comparison to other Jane Austen novels. Like Persuasion has so little dialogue in comparison to this, I felt. It was an amazing capitulation on Regency era manners and kind of a social status satire. What was considered important to become marriageable. So, I mean, I really did like Emma as a character, despite how flawed she is. And she did develop throughout the novel, so at least there was that Emma in all of her vanity and assumptions, the way she let societal beliefs ooze through her behaviour, but also how, because she takes on Harriet sort of as, you know, her puppet, she wants control over someone to enact societal pressures upon. I liked how we also saw that mirrored later on a little bit with Mrs. Elton and Jane Fairfax. So, I mean, there is a lot to love. For example, Emma's relationship with her father was absolutely fascinating to me because, you know, he's clearly a hypochondriac, which possibly is related to the mother's death. That's not a spoiler, that's like pre-established. And I just found how trapped Emma was quite compelling, honestly. She doesn't want to get married, honestly, just because of the father. You know, by the end, I felt that Harriet was kind of underutilized, and I did have mixed feelings on the main love interest, Mr. Knightley. The banter was really good at the beginning, but there are some elements that are obviously considered a little problematic nowadays, which give me a little bit of a sour taste when it comes to Mr. Knightley and Emma. But I did enjoy it overall. My main thing really was Mrs. Elton as kind of a mirror for Emma to see some of her worst traits in another person, which I think spurred her to develop. But what made this quite a hard read as well was, again, dialogue heavy. Then you also have a chatterbox character called Miss Bates, who I believe it was used quite well, intellectually speaking, but it was super difficult to actually read those passages where, you know, she's just spewing gossip and stuff for pages and pages, and that was not my thing. So I have mixed feelings on this book from an entertainment perspective, but I super respect what Jane Austen did with this book, and I think it is worth reading. Next up, I have The Victorian Chase Lounge by Margarita Lasky. I really liked this. It was only 100 pages, but it had a lot to say. It was a confusing but emotional romp with a lot to say in terms of gender roles. And because it's a time travel story, it goes to show how one is more punished in the past for kind of not so womanly behaviours, and also for being ill, because there was no cure for tuberculosis in the Victorian era, which is where our protagonist from the modern day travels to. And yeah, it was a very surreal book, lots of confusion and kind of psychological horror. I think my main criticism is that I felt like it would have worked so much better in the first person rather than the third person, because there's so many filter words like she thought, in her mind, blah, 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 which could have just been completely cut from the story had it been told in third person. Plus, we're literally in her perspective the entire time anyway, and then she could have possibly brought in some third person stuff later on to kind of get the whole time weirdness where she's both people at once coming. But I thought it was super interesting. Like, it's very short, just give it a try. I have acquired a few Persephone books secondhand this month, so I'm very excited to read the rest. Next up, I read Alone in Berlin by Hans Fallada, which is a pseudonym, a very bleak book about a normal factory worker and his wife, based on a true story set in Nazi Germany. So let me read a tiny bit from the blurb. So, when Otto discovers his only son has been killed fighting at the front, he's shocked into an extraordinary act of resistance and starts to drop anonymous postcards attacking Hitler across the city. If caught, he will be executed. And I really liked the dynamic between him and his wife and how they kind of get pulled into that act and they feel compelled to do it, even though, again, it's so bleak that we find out it has basically very little impact at all, and it just ends up getting them both killed. Yes, that's a massive spoiler, but again, it's based on a true story and you kind of know that's what's going to happen the whole time. I did enjoy a lot of it. I just felt that it's quite a long book. We're talking almost 600 pages, and a lot of it could have been cut down and edited. It moves extremely fast because of the present tense and very simple action-based prose, but it also spells out almost every single point that it's trying to make in the most, like, hitting you in the face with it way possible. I do think it's worth reading, but I didn't really like a lot of the secondary characters because, yes, the main plot is about the postcards, but we go on many side tangents along the way, and I was not invested in some of them, especially with Emile and like the first inspector guy. Now we have the big one that I finally finished this month, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I had super mixed feelings on this, and I might make a full video about it. I really enjoyed a lot of the first half of the book, I will say that much. You know, it just felt though that it spiraled very fast in terms of we didn't even really feel the development phase. We were just told that they had developed more, because essentially what's happening is that this large cast of characters are trying to find purpose and meaning within their life. And then in the later half of the book, we start getting even deeper into Tolstoy's own philosophy on history, predestiny. He attacks the myth of the great man. He wants to kind of take Napoleon down a notch and really center the fact that humans move history overall, not just men making decisions. That's very much oversimplifying it. I really feel like I need to make a full video on this just to give some of my thoughts. So philosophically speaking, though, it still was frustrating because instead of maybe something like, I don't know, Dostoevsky, sorry I compared him to Dostoevsky, but it didn't feel interwoven throughout the text. It was very much like, okay, this chapter is just an essay on his philosophy of history, and there was no mention of the characters. So in one sense, it's almost two separate works in one. And again, it's all very thematically consistent, but some of it's very repetitive, and honestly, it could have been trimmed down. But I think it was worth reading overall. I'm very happy that I did read it. I just think I'll have to meditate on this one a bit more. Next up, I have The Last September by Elizabeth Bowen. I do not want to talk about this because I made a whole video on it. I really loved this though, and I think that you should read it. If you're interested in kind of the 1920s state of Ireland in English relations, Ireland's fight for independence and all, check it out. It's not that long, 200 pages, but so much to say. Next I have Virginia Woolf and the Rave Rats, A Different Sort of Friendship, edited by William Pryor. This is a collection of letters from Virginia Woolf and Jacques and Gwen Revrat, or Raverat. It was actually really worth it. I'm trying to read one non-fiction book a month. It was a bit difficult this month because War and Peace took a lot of time, lads, okay? I honestly found this to be a really worthwhile read. It was really sad near the end as well because Jacques is dying of tuberculosis or some other consumptive type disease. And when he dies, again, you're like, that's when Gwen stops sending the dictated letters and starts sending her own letters to Virginia Woolf. And her grief, I was just very sad. And there were some lovely insights into Virginia Woolf's letter style, her sense of self and attachment and judgment towards certain people within the Bloomsbury circle. Some really good literary opinions in this because Jacques and Woolf both love literature a lot. For example, I learned that Virginia Woolf loves Catherine Mansfield, so I picked this up during the month, which I might read in March, we'll see. Next, I read We by Yevgeny Zamyatin and and that was the book that very directly inspired 1984 to the point where Orwell essentially copies the whole book's layout, central ideas, and refines them into his own political treatise, if you will. Yeah, I love 1984 a lot, so I really wanted to read that. I really loved the surreal nature and imagery in this, and we felt a lot more claustrophobic and brainwashed in comparison to Winston in 1984. They all have numbers for names as well, which really added to the collectivization. Also, a translation note is that in the translation I read, kind of the big brother figure was called a well-doer, whereas in this, the audio version I dipped into near the end, it was called a benefactor, and I honestly preferred the well-doer. I think that a lot of the more childish ways that the authoritarian language is constructed in We actually really helped build this atmosphere that was keeping all of the subjects of the country and the United States like subdued and really placid and easily controlled. The character in this I-330 was really interesting and intriguing, where the fanatics fall into that groupthink error even in their rebellion. No, I'll say is the repetition of like focus on lips was a bit annoying, and also has its own kind of racist iteration too. So it's far from a perfect work, but I do think it was worth reading. Yeah, just warning for that. I read Tokyo Express by Saicho Matsumoto, and I thought this was a really interesting short palate cleanser. 150 mystery novel, lots of train timetables, lots of Sherlock Holmes style deducing and following a trail, trying to track the perpetrator's movements surrounding a double suicide. I think my main criticism is that it's really just a mystery story. There are basically no characters to care about. It's very bland and matter-of-fact in its delivery, but it was very bingeable and pretty good and entertaining. I just feel like it was kind of a mid-of-the-range book overall, though. Lastly, I read The Monk by Matthew Lewis, something that was on my TBR for so long, but I finally got it. Was a wild ride that lives up to its depraved reputation, and I will honestly, though, never recover from some bits of this book. At one point, a boob is referred to as a beauteous orb, and essentially that key moment is what makes the monk Ambrosio go from this pious character to a rape and awful person, and just completely, yeah. I think in one sense this was a really excellent story for depicting how corrupt and evil churches and nuns and monks can be, because not only is it a gothic tale in terms of atmosphere, of, you know, women being controlled in this book quite a lot by everybody who has institutional power. So the nuns, for example, shame and admonish one of the characters for getting pregnant outside of wedlock, and it's honestly extremely brutal with how it treats the female characters. And even Ambrosio, I found the end hilarious though. Like, karma is a bitch, I'll say that much. But I do think that Matilda / Rosario was an amazing character, and I really liked how he developed. I like to think of her kind of as gender fluid in my head, just like headcanon. But like the part where she says, "I'm not a prostitute," and she really fights back against Ambrosio after seeing how he behaves to Antonia, who is the female character who's completely innocent. And then we also have Agnes, who's like the middle ground between Matilda and Antonia. So it was actually just a great book. I think though it was, you know, sensational and fun, but the language was a bit repetitive. For example, it says bosom, like to talk about someone's chest. Whenever they have a feeling, it also uses bosom, and it appears so many times that if you took a shot every time it appeared, you would actually die before you reach the 20% mark or something. It was ridiculous. But I think a feminist reading of this is quite fun, but I don't think that was fully the intent, because I don't know, when I looked into the author, like, he did inherit a lot of land in Jamaica and slaves and stuff. He was very rich, you know, he was able to rub shoulders with Goethe despite only being 18, 19 when he wrote this. So I don't know, okay? But yeah. So that was every book I read in February 2026. I have a lot of amazing books that I'm going to be talking about throughout the rest of the year because my TBR is stacked. So please subscribe if you would like to hear me talk about more. This has been 30th Century Reverie Media. I'm Kay. Thank you for watching.